Bortoluzzi. Um, I am a marine biologist, and a shark scientist and a conservationist. I live in Killiney in County Dublin, and I currently work in Dublin at the Irish Environmental Network. But I'm also an ambassador for Sharks for Kids and a scientific advisor on the Irish Basque and Shark Group. I've been studying and working with sharks for the past 10 years or so, and it's led me to go to some really wonderful places, including the Bahamas, and the Philippines, and also studying sharks right here in our back garden in Ireland. So before I move on to how we study sharks and why sharks are so important, I wanted to very quickly just go over some really wonderful facts about sharks, including exactly what sharks are. So, what is a shark? Um, about what a shark is actually on this picture right here. Right in the middle of its body, you can see some lines. Those lines are what we call gills, and it's the big difference between a shark and a dolphin, for example. A dolphin has a blowhole on the top of its head, and it breathes air. So a dolphin has to go back up to the surface of the water to breathe air before it can dive back down. Sharks don't need to do that. Sharks can spend their entire life underwater because they breathe water. And they do that through these gills on the side of their body. So the water comes in through their mouth and it goes out through their gills. Now, another type of animal that can do that is fish. So sharks are actually a type of fish. They're a very special type of fish, but they are a type of fish. So just like cod, tuna, salmon, or even the goldfish that you might keep in your aquarium at home, they are part of the same family. But of course, they're their own special group, and they have some very big differences between sharks and the fish, like salmon or cod, for example. And the biggest difference is their skeleton. Shark skeletons are made entirely of cartilage. So fish, just like us, have bones that are very white in color. You might have eaten or had a fish bone in your mouth when you've eaten cod, for example. But sharks have cartilage, and the difference between cartilage and bone is that cartilage is very flexible. So, as an example, if you touch your nose from the top here and you move it all the way down and you get to the tip of your nose, you can feel that it changes from being really hard bone to being really bendy, and twisty, but it's still hard. And that's because the tip of your nose, as well as the tip of your ear, has cartilage in it. Cartilage is very flexible and it's lighter than bone. So it helps sharks move really fast in the water and twist and turn very quickly. Now, the next difference between sharks and the other types of fish is their skin. Fish have scales that overlap with each other, but sharks don't have normal scales. They have scales that are adapted to their lifestyle, and we call them dermal denticles. They're actually tiny, tiny little teeth that cover their entire body. And they look like this when you zoom in on them. And now each different species of shark has different types of dermal denticles. Dermal means skin, denticles means teeth. So it's teeth on their skin. And depending on where they live and how they move, different species of sharks will have different shaped dermal denticles. Now, for example, this one in the background doesn't actually really look like teeth, and that is a shark that spends most of its time under rocks or on the sand. So because it spends so much time under rocks or around corals, it needs really tough skin so that it's not going to cut itself or injure itself. And that's the skin of a nurse shark. And nurse sharks are a species of sharks that live in the Caribbean in tropical waters. And as I said, they spend a lot of time under rocks. The other type of dermal denticles that you see here are much pointier. And that's the skin of a short fin mako shark. And short fin mako sharks are some of are the fastest shark in the sea. And so these dermal denticles that cover their entire body allows allow them to slice through the water and move very, very fast. So different types, different places of different habitats that they live in and different ways of moving mean different types of dermal denticles. It's an adaptation. Now, speaking of teeth, it's kind of what we know the best about shark. What we know sharks for the most is their teeth. But did you know that again, all of the different species of sharks have different shaped teeth, and it depends on what they feed on. So sharks that feed mostly on fleshy animals will have very pointy teeth. So, for example, up here is the cookie cutter shark, and the cookie cutter shark will bite into other animals, whether it's whales, seals, and sometimes other sharks, and twist from side to side to take out a plug of flesh. So it doesn't actually kill its prey, it just takes a bite out of them. Because it's so small, it doesn't need to eat a whole animal, and they just take out a piece of flesh. Now, I can't imagine it's very pleasant for their prey, but their prey do survive most of the time. Now, other animals like the tiger shark, for example, tiger sharks will feed on sea turtles, they will eat fish, they'll eat dead whales, for example. So they pretty much eat a little bit of everything. In fact, they kind of have a nickname in the shark research world, which is that they are the trash cans of the sea, the rubbish cans of the and that's because they'll just eat anything. And we've actually found tiger sharks with things like tires, like car tires in their stomach or cans of Pepsi, for example, because they just will gobble things up without realizing that they're eating something that's not good for them. Other animals like the other species like the nurse shark, they eat things that are very tough like crustaceans, so like lobster, for example, and they have teeth that allow them to crush through the shell of the lobster in order to get the flesh out. Now, humans only have one row of teeth throughout our life. We have the top row and the bottom row of teeth, and we get, over the course of our lifetime, a total of 52 teeth. We have our 20 baby teeth, then we lose them, and then we grow. We have 32 adult teeth, and we keep those for our whole life. But sharks have several rows of teeth, and those teeth are constantly falling out. So most sharks will have 5 rows of teeth. And if you look at a shark jaw, you can see those rows in their mouth. And it's like a conveyor belt of teeth. So anytime they lose the front tooth, the next one will slide forwards and replace it. So over the course of their lifetime, they have thousands of teeth. And they, on average, will lose one tooth every week. So imagine taking a bite out of an apple, and every time you take a bite out of an apple, you lose a tooth. That's quite a lot of teeth to go throughout your lifetime. Okay, so coming back to those gills that I was telling you about earlier, I told you that they breathe water. So even though they live in the ocean, they need oxygen to live. And they use these gills to pull oxygen out of the water. And the way it works is that the water will come in through their mouth and then gets pushed over the gills. Now, we've all heard that sharks have to keep swimming in order to survive. And that is absolutely true. Some species do need to keep moving in order to survive. And it's called, by moving through the water enters their mouth and then flows over their gills. And that species like the great white shark, for example, with the short fin mako I was telling you about, the blue shark, those sharks have to continuously keep moving in order to keep breathing. If they stop, they will die. And that is called ram ventilation. But some sharks, like I told you, spend a lot of their time on the bottom of the ocean. They don't move, they just stay still. And that means that they have adapted a different way of breathing. And what they do is they open their mouth. When they open their mouth, it sucks in the water. And when they close their mouth, it pushes it back over their gills. So you can see the gills of this hound shark here moving, opening and closing. Now, um, that type of breathing is called buccal pumping. Buccal means mouth, so it's pumping through their mouth. And some sharks have even taken this adaptation a step further. And because they spend a lot of their time on the sand and their mouth is on the underside of their body, they actually, if they were to open their mouth, they would breathe in a lot of sand. So what they have evolved instead are these things called spiracles. And so if I pause the video here, you can see behind the eye of the shark, this hole, this little hole. So that's when it can't breathe with its mouth. Instead, what it will do is bring in the water through this hole in the top of its head. And some species of sharks have evolved this, but it's most common in species of skates. And these are flat sharks, essentially. They're part of the same family as sharks, but they are flat and usually have this kind of shape like a diamond. So these, we often affectionately call them flat sharks. And you can see right here behind the eye, spiracles, so these holes that allow them to breathe. And that's because the mouth is on the underside of the body. So I've told you about the different shapes of sharks. I've told you about some of the adaptations they have, but where do we find sharks? And do we have any in Ireland? Well, sharks are pretty much found all over the world. We find them in the Arctic Sea, under the ice. We find them in the tropical waters of the Caribbean. We find them all the way down to the Southern Sea, at the tip of Argentina and South Africa, in Australia. We find sharks in rivers. We all know about bull sharks that can go from the river to the sea. Um, but we also have species of sharks, skates, and rays that only live in rivers. And they can be found to depths as deep as 3,600 meters. So they pretty much inhabit most parts of the ocean. And in Ireland, that's also true. We find them on our coasts. We find them in the deep sea. So this is a real map, the real map of Ireland, where we can see that this area is the whole area of our seas that belongs to Ireland, the seas that belong to Ireland. And there are some very deep part. The part called Porcupine Abyssal Plain goes down to over 4,000 meters. Now that's deeper than the deepest shark can live, but throughout that whole part of the ocean above that, there will be sharks that live there. In fact, in Ireland, we have over 70 recorded species of sharks, skates, and rays. Some of those species you can see right here. We have 33 species of skates and rays, including the thornback ray, the flapper skate, which is the biggest species of skates. They can reach over 2 meters in size. The white skate. And we also have 39 species of recorded sharks in Irish waters. That includes the basking shark, the porbeagle, and the blue shark, which are sharks that I have studied. We do also get short-fin mako sharks, but some of the most common one are these small sharks called lesser spotted cat sharks. And if you ever go snorkeling out in the sea, those are a species that you might be lucky enough to see. And we also have a special species called the angel sharks, which are critically endangered and for a long time had completely disappeared from our coast. And we are starting to see them again. So it's really optimistic. And it's a really good sign. Now, sharks can either be migratory, so they are coming through our waters, maybe during the summer, for example. We see basking sharks a lot more during the summer. And they might be passing through because they're following their prey or they are moving through on their way to somewhere else. And we also have shark species that just stay here and never go anywhere else. And those are, for example, the ones that I told you about, the lesser spotted cat shark, or the angel shark. And often they are much smaller sharks. So, what are some of their other adaptations? I told you about some of them already, but because we find these sharks in lots of different places, they are adapted to the habitats that they live in. Those might be the seagrass, for example, or it might be out in the middle of the ocean in the big blue. And those sharks that live out in the big blue tend to be shaped specifically for speed and for constantly moving. So the short-fin mako shark is the fastest species of sharks in the world. It can reach up to 60 miles per hour, and it needs to be really fast to hunt their very fast-moving prey. Basking sharks are also what we call pelagic. Pelagic means out in the blue, in the big blue ocean. And they are adapted to eating plankton, so they have these big mouths, and I'll tell you more about it in a second. Um, so the other type of habitat that we see a lot around here are kelp forests. And I was telling you about lesser spotted cat sharks. They spend most of their time in the seaweed, in the kelp. They eat things like crustaceans, like mollusks, small crabs, and small fish. And what's really interesting about cat sharks is that they lay eggs. So some species of sharks will give birth to live young, and others will lay eggs. And those eggs, those egg cases that they lay, look a lot like seaweed. So what they do is that they hide it in the seaweed, in the kelp. They tie it to the seaweed, which gives helps them camouflage the egg cases, so it protects them from predators, and it also stops them from floating around away in the current. And this is what they look like when they wash up on our beaches. Other sharks are like the angel shark that I was telling you about. They spend more time in the sand rather than in the seaweed, and they've adapted to camouflage themselves in the sand. So you can see this angel shark is the same color pretty much as the sand, and it also buries itself in the sand. So you could be swimming over an angel shark in the sand and not even realize that it's there. And they do this because they've adapted to hunting with a method called ambush predation. So when the fish that they want to catch swims over them, it won't see them. And that means that the shark can then leap right out of the sand and catch the fish completely by surprise, just like that. So they are ambush predators. And they can project their jaws right out of their head to catch that fish. I'm going to skip very quickly over these. So other ways that sharks have adapted are through their fins. So depending on where they live and how they hunt, their fins will have different shapes. And the thresher shark here is one of my favorite sharks. It actually uses its tail like a whip to smack into shoals of fish and knock the fish out so that it can then just pick them up instead of just chasing after them really fast, like the mako shark does. And I think that's such a cool way. It's the only shark that has adapted to hunt in this way. And I think that makes it really amazing. And like I was saying earlier, we also have the skates and rays. Now, the difference between a skate and a ray is primarily its body shape. So skates will have more of a diamond shape, whereas rays are much more rounded. But the other difference is that skates lay eggs and rays don't. They give birth to live babies. It can get a little bit confusing because some skates, like the thornback ray, is called a ray, but it's actually a skate. It's even confusing for me sometimes. And they've adapted to spend a lot of their time down on the seafloor, just like the angel shark has. So they have a much flatter body. Their colors are more similar to the sand they spend their time in, and so on and so forth. I'm actually going to skip over this. And this one is just to show some of the ways they move their body in order to swim. So you actually don't realize, but this spotted ray here is actually moving its fins, its pectoral fins on the side of its body to move forwards. It moves it like a wave, basically. It undulates its body in order to move forwards. Okay, so I told you that some sharks lay eggs and some sharks give birth to live young. Well, this is what some of those eggs look like. So skates lay these quite dark egg cases, and they will kind of hook them on into seaweed or in the rocks. And once they've hatched, those egg cases will wash up on our beaches. And that's also the case for lesser spotted cat sharks and nurse hounds that look very much like bigger versions of the lesser spotted cat sharks. And again, all of these eggs will wash up on our beaches, and we can go and find them by hunting for them in the seaweed on the shore. This is a really cool video of a flapper skate, which is that big skate that I was showing you earlier being born out of the egg case. So it pushes its way out of the egg case. Um, and these flapper skates are very rare. So if ever you find these big egg cases on the beach, it's very exciting. And I'll tell you how you can report it later. And you can actually sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes find live eggs with the shark still inside of it, especially if you go snorkeling. And if you shine a light behind it, you can actually see the baby shark swimming inside of it, which is very cool. But not all sharks, as I was saying, lay eggs. Some of them give birth to live young. Um, very often they don't have very many babies, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, sometimes only one or two. And when they're born, they have these tiny scars right here on their body, which is basically their version of a belly button. But because sharks are really great at healing, those belly buttons eventually disappear after a week or so of being born. So if ever you were to see a shark with this scar on its belly, you would know that it was a brand new baby. This is a lemon shark. It lives in tropical waters. We don't have it in Irish waters. Okay, so for the next few minutes, I want to highlight basking sharks because they're such wonderful animals that we find in our waters here in Ireland. And I am part of the Irish Basking group, which studies them and helps and tries to get them protected in our waters. So basking sharks are the second largest fish in the sea, not just shark, but fish in the sea. The biggest one being whale sharks. They are filter feeders, so that means that they actually filter the water. So through an adaptation in their gills that I was telling you about, their gills actually look like combs, and that means that they can trap, as they swim with their mouth wide open, they can trap the plankton in those gills. And once they have enough of it trapped in those gills, they close their mouth and they swallow it all up. And plankton are these tiny animals and plants that live in the ocean. And they kind of grow a lot when the sun is out. It helps them really grow. And there can be these big blooms of plankton in the sea, especially in the summer on our coasts here. And that's why the basking sharks are coming to our coasts. And actually, the first basking sharks have been spotted this year along the west coast. So in the next couple of months, hopefully we'll have lots of basking sharks visible from the beaches and the cliffs around the west of Ireland. They are highly mobile, so they move very, very far. And that can look like this. They have been tracked. So we put devices on them that help us track them. And we've seen them go to places like North Africa, the Bay of Biscay, along the west of France. up to Scotland and to Norway. And we also have tracked them in the past, and not me specifically, but scientists have tracked them in the past, crossing the entire Atlantic. So those migrations can be up to 10,000 kilometers in distance. But those are not the only things that are amazing about basking sharks. They're also incredibly powerful animals. So even though we think of them very often as slow moving, basking sharks can throw themselves out of the water with the same power as a white shark. So they will swim from the deep very, very fast up to the surface and throw themselves out of the water. And it looks like this photo here in the bottom left. And we don't fully understand or know why they do this, but we think it's possibly because linked to mating or courtship. So maybe it's a way of communicating with each other. Or it could also be to get rid of parasites that are clinging onto their body. And speaking of courtship and mating, in recent years, scientists have made this amazing discovery about basking sharks. We have found them, and it was originally filmed by filmmaker Ken O'Sullivan in 2016 off the west coast offshore of Ireland. In much deeper waters, he observed these big circles of basking sharks. So it's like a real life Sharknado where the basking sharks just circle each other in the water. They're not feeding, their mouths are closed, and some of them breach and they kind of follow each other. So we think that this is how they find mates. So all of these sharks circling, some of them are male, some of them are female. And so we think this is how they are finding each other in order to reproduce. And there can be up to 30 sharks in the water at one time, all circling each other. It's really a spectacle of nature that I would absolutely love to see one day. Now, because we have so many basking sharks on our coasts in the summer, and these basking sharks are now protected under the Wildlife Act, it's really important to respect them and to be careful when we do see them that we're not disturbing them. So the Basking Shark Group, the Irish Basking Shark Group, has a code of conduct that we recommend. So if you are someone who would like to go and see basket sharks or who does get to see them, I really recommend that you go and have a read of this or tell your parents to go and have a read of this so that you know how to look at the basking sharks and see the basking sharks without disturbing them and doing it in a respectful way because they are amazing animals. And if you do get to see them, it's truly wonderful. Okay, I'm almost done. But very quickly, I wanted to tell you how we learn about sharks and why it's so important. I've told you about one of those ways. Sometimes we attach tags to them, and that helps us track them across the ocean. So even when we don't see them, we can still follow them. And those tags give us information like the temperature of the water they're swimming in and the depth they're swimming at. And sometimes those tags are just ID numbers so that if they are caught again one day or seen again one day, we have the number and we can go back and see what shark it was and when we tagged it the first time. Some of the other ways, including here that you can see me, is by collecting samples of them. So we work a lot with shark anglers who help us catch the sharks. We take the samples just like when you go to the doctor and you might get a blood test taken. We do the same with the sharks, and we can have a look at a lot of the things like their diet, so what they eat, their DNA, so who they're related to in the ocean, what other sharks they're related to, and whether or not they are pregnant, for example. And we can also just observe them in their natural habitat using snorkeling and scuba diving. We can take pictures of them. We can film them to have a look at their behaviors. And we don't always have to be there in person in order to do that. Sometimes we just drop cameras into the ocean, and we just see what comes up and where they, if sharks are going to come to it, and what they do. And that means that we're not disturbing them and we're not influencing them, so we can just see their behaviors. So these are some really cool videos. These devices are called BRUVs, baited remote underwater videos. Okay. So why are sharks so important? Well, sharks are part of the food web. They are very often the top predator in the ocean. So they make sure that the food web in the ocean is kept in balance because they eat fish that are smaller than them. And those fish will in turn eat other things that eat other things. And if the shark were to disappear, then those tuna, for example, on this photo, they would reproduce and there'd be a lot more of tuna, but they would eat all of the mackerel. And all that means that then the smaller fish would grow and there'd be loads and loads of that. And then there'd be no more plankton because all the fish had eaten it. So the sharks really keep the food web in balance. And they also have an effect where they scare animals away. So those tuna, if there's a shark around, will swim away and leave the mackerel in peace. And so they also have are important in that regard. But sharks are under threat. There are much fewer sharks in our ocean than there were 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And that's because of things like fishing, especially overfishing. Humans take so much fish out of the ocean that we are killing sharks in very high numbers. And we also often catch them accidentally when we're not targeting them. And we're targeting mackerel, for example, but we catch a shark in the net. That's called bycatch. We're also destroying their habitats very often, in places like the Caribbean where sharks live in mangroves, for example, or in the kelp forest over here. We are building things that are destroying that habitat, which is having a big impact on sharks. They can't reproduce or they can't live there anymore, so they don't survive. We also are putting a lot of things in our ocean that are not good for sharks. So they might be eating plastic or they might be getting entangled in it, which makes it very hard, if impossible, for them to survive. And of course, climate change is also having a big impact on shark because the temperature of the water is changing or the ocean is becoming more acidic, and all of these things are having big impacts in sharks, and they are impacts that we still don't fully understand and that we're studying all the time. That is something else as well. There are still many things that we don't understand how it's going to impact them, whether it's building wind farms or mining in the deep sea. We don't fully understand the impacts it's going to have on sharks. So sharks really need your help. The biggest way you can do that is by talking about them, sharing why they're so interesting, spreading the word. And so many species of sharks are in deep trouble. They are endangered or critically endangered. So it's really important for us to act now and to talk about sharks, and also to become citizen scientists. So I was telling you about the egg cases earlier and how you can find them on the beach. Well, one of the activities that you can do is go out and look for them, take photos of them, record them, and then submit your findings to the Irish program. Is called Marine Dimensions, First Search Ireland. And you can also report your findings on the Shark Trust website. They've been doing it for years. So you can visit those websites and record your findings. If you see basking sharks, please do submit your sightings to the Irish Basking Shark Group. You can go onto the website, and that helps us study them and know where they are. And if you ever are really lucky enough to see angel sharks, you can report them to the Irish Elasmobranch Group. All of these links, you can have a look at the recording later, but I'll also make sure to pass it on to the organisers so they can send it on to you. And you can find a lot more citizen science and resources on the Irish Elasmo Group website, on the Irish Basque and Shark Group website, etc. I'm gonna finish there and say thank you so much for listening. I know I'm a little bit over time, but hopefully we have some time for questions. And please feel free to check out the websites, the Sharks for Kids websites, the Irish Basque and Shark Group website, and also to follow me or email me if you have any questions.